welcome to part 3. And in this video, we're going to be refining the model throughout, starting with the corner piece. So what I'm going to do is copy the corner piece we made previously and move it to one side. And we don't need every single corner piece, so let's just delete all the ones we don't need to reduce the amount of work we need to do. So let's delete these faces and focus on one corner component only. So the reason for doing this is initially we just built the core shapes, right? So that's fine, but you don't have any, well, you have infinite sharpness across everything, which is not ideally what you want in CGI assets, especially when you render them. It doesn't look right and it looks really fake. So the aim here is to refine the model by way of adding edge highlights to everything. So that means adding some bevels, maybe even a subdivision modifier, which I won't be doing in this example, but that's always an option if you need more detail. So all I've done there is select all of the sharp edges and added a bevel. Now, as you can see there, we have some shading issues where the topology doesn't quite know what to do with itself in terms of shading. And it's worth noting I have auto smooth enabled at the moment. But that shouldn't affect the sides as such. They should still look good. So what I'm going to do to fix this is select those components there, those faces, and simply, which are n-gons, and simply create an inset. And this is a good technique you should try to use for many things in modeling, because it really does help to get rid of any shading problems. As I said there, the auto smooth I'm going to turn off. We don't need that. And just make sure we have shade smooth enabled. We don't need to have auto smooth anymore. So that's a really good technique, and something that, as I say, is a good, I would say, best practice in hard surface modeling like this. So do make sure you try to do that if you have issues with shading and things like that. So you can see there, we're going to add a mirror modifier. I'm just going to use my add-on to do that, BB Toolkit Pro. You don't have to do that, of course. Just head over to the modifiers and add a mirror modifier on the X, Y, and Z. So you can see there it is there, the mirror modifier. X, Y, and Z, clipping we don't need, and we can apply that. So let's leave that for the corners for now. And let's work on the frame element. So I'm going to duplicate that, make a backup of it, and move it into the backups folder, which I should have mentioned earlier. So let's isolate this and have a look at this frame. So again, I'm going to select sharp edges through that menu and just have a look and see what's been selected here. And again, I'm going to add a bevel. And let's keep it consistent. So I used 0.00125 before. So I'll do the same on all of these as much as I can. Excuse me. And get rid of the auto smooth and shade smooth. So that you can still see we have some shading issues here. And again, that's because we don't have enough supporting inner faces. So what I'm going to do here is select all of these flat areas. So click on one of those and hold down Shift and select as many as you can. As I'm doing that, I noticed here I haven't got that cut which I need in that corner. So I must have missed one before. So let's join these together by pressing the J key. And there's one more over here. So 1, 2 vertices, press J to join. Let's make sure at the top we have that as well. And the other sides. And they're looking pretty good. So if we're happy that we've done that properly now, we can go and select these individual faces. I'll quickly speed through that. Like so. Don't need to worry about the inside ones because we're not going to see those. So we're going to press I to inset those. Lovely. And now you can see now the shading works really, really well without having to use auto smooth. And that's great. Let's go back to the cube and work on the next component. And the reason I'm doing the same bevel size is because we can see there that everything matches up nicely. Let's work on the next piece, these middle bits. Shift D to duplicate, drag it into your backups folder just in case we mess it up. And let's have a look at this one now. We've got a mirror modifier on this ready. So let's just work on the the original part. Don't have to worry about the others. Again, let's tab into edit mode and select all of the sharp edges. Let's make sure our selection is correct. Always check. And once again, let's add a bevel with Control B. And if you remember, 0.00125 is the bevel size that we've used so far. Now this one's still a bit messy. You can see we have some shading issues again. So you can guess what we're going to do. We're going to select these inner faces here, which are isolated, and add an inset. So as I say, this is a really good technique for everything in modeling, not just in Blender, of course, but other software as well. So it really helps to support the shading and the model. Excuse me. So let's turn off. Make sure you have auto smooth turned off and just shade smooth, and that's fine. Might come back to that one because there might be still a few bits that don't look perfect. I can spot a few things there already, so I'll probably come back to that later on. But in the next point, or the next part I should say, is let's work on these inner panels. So with the white panels, again, I'm going to shift D to duplicate, right click to leave them in place, and drag a copy of that into the backups collection. Let's switch to edge mode, and once again, select sharp edges. So there's a lot of rinse and repeat here. Same process, same techniques. Applies to every model. You can use this technique. So we'll give that a bevel again. And there it is. Let's make that perhaps a little bit smaller. Doesn't need to be exactly the same as the other one now because it doesn't really touch anything else. That's looking pretty good. You can immediately see we have some shading issues, of course, on those large add-ons. Again, let's turn off auto smooth under the object data. And we're going to select these faces, these add-ons. And again, once more, let's press the I key to inset those. Make it nice and tight there. Not too much, just enough to give it a decent, sensible inset. And I'm going to give it one more for luck. Brilliant. So that's looking really, really better now. That was terrible grammar. I apologize. Right, the next part, let's work on the outer ring element there. So at the risk of repeating myself, which I will on this video, because we're doing the same thing on all the parts, Shift D to duplicate it, move it into your backup folder, turn off the auto smooth. And let's try selecting sharp edges and see what happens. And you can immediately see we have some quirks there, but you can change the angle, actually, the sharpness angle in the options, which I didn't do. Maybe I should have done that. But instead, I switched to the selection brush, which is the C key, and that will turn your mouse into like a selection brush. If that selection area is too large or small, just scroll your mouse wheel and that will decrease and increase the size. So I'm going to deselect these by pressing the mouse button, the middle mouse button with that brush thing. You can do it manually as well. So I'm going to select these edge loops. After having done all that, I'm going to select these edge loops and give it a bevel. Again, I'm going to go down to 125 meters. I'm going to add a support loop just there and also there as well. I'm going to select both of those and just move them up so they're closer to the top than they are to the middle or the bottom. And again, these are support loops that will really help out the shading, look a bit more consistent and linear where we want it to be. So let's have a look at these holes now we've got in this circle. So what I'm going to do is select this edge ring here. I'm going to scale that up a little bit, but it does get a bit distorted. So that seems to have worked that time. I might have pressed actually the Alt S rather than the scale. So give that a go. Whoops, let's just make that 1.2, something like that. I'm going to do the same for all of these now. Manually, of course. So just go through and select the same thing. And scale those up. I'll speed through that because it's quite tedious to do the same thing. You can see that I've used I saw Shift S come up, but I'm sure it's Alt S is the scale by normals kind of thing. But anyway, I'm now going to select these inner edge loops there at the top, the leading ones, and create a little bevel like that. Now the hole we've got down further inside looks a little bit rounded off, and that's because we've got this large angle on at the bottom, and everything just flows into one shading angle, I guess. So I'm going to select these circles at the bottom there. And with that done, switch to edge mode, Control B, and add a very small bevel to those as well. That will really help to clamp the shading to get a better look. That's all I'm going to do on that. Nothing much to say there. So let's tab back out of local view. And let's work on the heart base, I've called it. Again, make a backup copy. And let's isolate that. And turn off auto smooth again. There's our mirror modifier. That's fine. You can leave that. And same process as before. As you can guess what I'm going to do. Select some edge loops. Don't have to worry about the bottom part. So try and select all of the sharp and leading edges, including the one at the front there, at that point. Lovely. And the one in the opposite side, hiding in that corner there. So with that done, we can now do Control B. Give it a bevel, 2 segments and a shape of 0.5, so it's a little bit rounded. The reason I do that is because I'm not going to be adding any subdivision modifiers to this. Feel free to do that if you want, but I'm not going to do it on this one. I don't think it really needs it. So I'm going to add a couple of edge loops on the outer and inner edges and bring those up as we did for the outer circle, just to help with the shading. Let's turn our attention to these similar holes that we had on the outer circle. And I've missed one there. There we go. Let's scale that up a wee bit. So I'm getting a dry throat again. Right, so let's make that 1.2 as we did for the circle. I remembered that from back then, so let's just do the same thing. So I'm selecting all of these edges, edge loops, and giving them a small bevel. Pretty simple stuff, right? Nothing complicated here, really. These are basic modeling techniques that you can use for most, if not all, hard surface modeling in any 3D package. That's looking good. Let's move this vertex. Now we've got a weird angle going on there in that corner. So let's tidy this up a little bit. So I'm going to select these 2 edges and right click and choose subdivide. And that will give us another vertex there. I'm just going to make some cuts using the J key with vertices selected. You can also use the knife tool by pressing K. I'm going to slide that along by pressing GG. And that's vertex sliding, which is cool. Let's do the same thing anywhere else that we need to, and I think that's good. Cool. So I'm going to do the same thing for the heart shape. I'm not going to show that in real time because it's exactly the same thing. So 1.125 for the bevel, keep it nice and consistent. And again, at the top where these corners converge, it needs a little bit of a tidying up. So I'm going to select these edges once more and subdivide them as we did with the heart base, and made some more cuts there, and edge slide this one. It's what I should have done at the beginning, but I didn't notice it at the time. So let's go back and tweak that. Yeah, and the shading looks pretty good. Again, we don't need auto smooth anymore. Make sure you have shade smooth on. And finally, I'm going to move these so that they're a little bit more in line with the other vertices. Little things, but they do help with the shading. Cool. Let's have a look at this half here. We've got these 2 halves. So select those faces, and once again, let's create an inset, just about so. and that's looking good. So going back to these ones now, I wasn't quite happy with some of these. So I'm going to go back and delete most of those and just leave the one corner again. And you can see there we have this slightly odd shading there. Not a lot, but a little bit. So just for completeness, I'm going to select all of these individual interfaces that we didn't add an inset to before. So just go around and select these. And we might as well select these as well, doesn't do any harm. And same on the other side. And of course, the top side as well. So with those ones selected, just create another inset. And that will definitely get rid of any shading anomalies. Because we're basically creating islands, flat islands, that can't possibly create any problems for us with shading. Now, I didn't do that on the inside. We won't see these, but I'm going to do them anyway. So I'm going to select these 3 n-gons and create an inset. And that looks much better. Cool. Shade smooth, just to make sure we're on the right one. And let's re-add our mirror modifier on all of the axes and apply it. And there it is. So I've switched over to rendered mode. And the reason I want to do that is to inspect the highlights and see if they're working as I anticipated. So I'm looking for nice catch lights on the edges, and everything looks really cool and nice and clean. That was pretty scary. Not those kind of edges, highlights, I should say. So there you go. You can see everything looking nice and tight there. The bevels nice and consistent, and we've got a really nice low poly, fairly low poly model. I mean, it is 24,000 faces, but that's not too much in the grand scheme of things. There you have it, guys, the refined model. Thanks for watching as always. If you enjoy my content, please leave a like and subscribe. Really helps me out. And thanks for watching. I'll let this play out and I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.